evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. Border services report an increase in attempts to illegally cross the Polish-Belarusian border. According to Deputy Prime Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, about 300 attempts to enter Poland were thwarted last night alone. These attempts are also increasingly aggressive. And we will talk about illegal immigration and other forms of hybrid warfare waged against the West by Russia and its ally, Belarus, with Grigol Julukhidze, Associate Professor of the Caucasus University. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Poland holds presidential elections next month. Meanwhile, as I have just said, the number of attempts to cross into Poland from Belarus grows by the day. So, do you think that these two are connected?
Sure, definitely. Because Belarus and Russia together are testing the readiness of Poland. In order to achieve this goal, they use some kind of primitive methods, but still quite effective. They do not need a lot of investments, but they need a coordinated cooperation and coordinated actions. Special services, especially the KGB and FSB, are controlling the mobility of illegal migrants. They supply them with necessary tools to storm the Polish border. It is very cheap and at the same time very alarming for the Polish national security. As a response, Poland must act very dramatically and at the same time remains in the regime of alert. Warsaw is obliged to control a 418 kilometers long border, which is a very important and serious challenge in terms of security, and it requires huge human and financial resources. And that's only one very simple mechanism used by these two authoritarian countries against not only Poland, but the European Union entirely.
Sure. Now, I understand absolutely the increase in numbers of such attempts, but how to explain the growing brutality of what's going on at the border? I mean, the brutality, of course, from the side of smugglers and illegal migrants.
That's an opportunity also for some bandit and gang groups to earn money. And they are encouraged by the special services, as I have already mentioned. And as for the growing aggression, it is the result of a very sophisticated and effective psychological information operations conducted by Russia. For example, if we go beyond Poland, there are very interesting cases happening to the West, Italy, Germany, not in the regard of instrumentalization and the weaponization of migration, and southern Caucasus, where the Russian Federation is winning information and psychological war. And this is the result of a very effective campaign that dehumanizes Poles generally and the state of Poland, in which, and in these narratives, the European Union and the West is portrayed as morally bankrupt and I would say generally evil collective unity. And these migrants who have nothing in common with the migration, they violate every single rule and regulation related to migration, are portrayed as the freedom seekers and the human beings who are seeking for better life. But those who seek better life do not knock on your door with sword or different instruments and tools to damage you and your family.
Now, Poland wants to counteract such propaganda. Now, what do you think about the Polish government's initiative to launch a social media campaign aimed to reach those who would be planning to cross illegally into the EU via the closed Polish border with Belarus? Do you think it will work?
it will have a very positive impact, but still, the Russians are winning this psychological and information war because they started it much earlier than the West. But still, that's a very positive initiative oriented on the capacity building and I would say demolition of various myths related to the possibilities and the chances to cross the EU border illegally. And I'm pretty sure that the Polish government, together with the European Union, will be working actively in the roots of this problem, not Russia and Belarus. It is impossible, but I mean the countries from where these individuals come to Poland, or at least try to cross this border. That would be a brilliant move, and I'm sure that that's the matter of time. But of course, we have to mention at the same time that Poland and the European Union is very, very limited in time because the Kremlin right now is orchestrating a very important and massive information campaign about these state actors, the European Union, and the EU partners as well.
But who is to be the target of this campaign?
Well, first of all, I would say that the targets of this campaign are Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. For example, in Georgia, they used a very effective approach and tactics, draining society. The more frequently you cross the red lines around an object, the less resistance you encounter. The strategy includes creeping occupation, abduction of Georgian citizens, and continuous testing of the level of response. As a result, resilience weakens. Also, psychological terror when you revive the deepest buried fear. For example, in case of Georgia, it is war. And spreading hopelessness. This is the final and far more effective stage than the previous two. You erode and ridicule state immunity to such an extent that people start believing nothing matters anymore. And this framework aligns closely with the hybrid warfare strategy and active measures historically used by Russian intelligence services, particularly the SVR, and GRU. These tactics are not exclusive to Georgia. They represent a global playbook of psychological, political, information warfare right now used against Ukraine, Moldova, especially I would underline the role of these operations in Germany and Italy, two nations that are affected by the traumas of the World War II. And I'm sure that another massive operation will be started against the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, where the Kremlin has important leverage for further impact.
Right, and in a moment I'll ask you about Moldova and Romania, maybe Georgia as well. But first, I'd like to ask you about Ukraine, or rather Ukrainians. Now, the Polish Minister of Internal Affairs says that in this tally of hybrid warfare cards that Russia has, the crisis on the border is only one of them. Another is the attempt to sow discord between the Ukrainians living in Poland and Poles. Now, how dangerous could that potentially be?
This is very dangerous. Russians have different modus operandis and different objectives in different countries. They are smart and one of the best in the world in terms of psychological information operations. They quite well understand that Poland will never become pro-Russian, that the Polish society is deeply affected by very traumatic historical interaction with Russia. That's why the narratives oriented on the advocacy of Putin or his foreign policy will be useless. That's why they use historic arguments and dispute, which is quite visible between the relationships of Ukrainians and Poles. And from this point of view, one of the most important narrative was the issue of Wołyń, and the reaction of ordinary Ukrainians about this tragic historic event and fact. And they deliberately were choosing and selecting those Ukrainians, especially from the marginal media outlets, who were denying the tragic events related to Volyn massacre, and mass murder of Poles. And that's a very important aspect that requires particular attention from the Polish government, especially Polish government, in order to protect the collective brain of Poles, in order not to not to be influenced by the toxic narratives against ally of Poland, which is right now Ukraine, because it is in the best Polish interest to see survived Ukraine as a state which will be able to deter Russia in case of Russia's further attempts to annex other countries, and that's only the matter of time.
It is easy to be influenced, as the example of Romania and its elections has shown us. Romania is gearing up for the presidential election this May, even before Poland. But Moldova is also holding parliamentary elections later in October, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there have been some reports that in Moldova, Russians may actually attempt something that has been dubbed a Georgian scenario. So to present a superficially officially pro-European party to gain much support, but that party would ultimately listen to orders from Moscow. Now, is such a scenario possible for Moldova? What do you think?
Sure, that's absolutely possible. That would be quite effective strategy and tactics to undermine stability of this country and undermine country's pro-Western orientation, to introduce a political group party which will be shown as extremely pro-Western, meanwhile under the direct and indirect control of Russian special services. Generally, the goal of the Russian Federation and Putin is to test NATO's Article 5 through salami tactics, gradual provocations designed to fragment unity and avoid triggering decisive response. In this context, Romania, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia will likely be the main objectives. Poland, while a strong NATO player, is less vulnerable to this type of hybrid manipulation due to its resilience and geopolitical positioning. And yes, I'm sure that the next steps related to the changing political orientation of pro-Western country, which is right now Moldova, will be followed by mass orchestrated psychological information operations to undermine stability and political, I would say, unity of pro-Western forces in this tiny country. Especially, we have to admit that the pro-Russian movements and moods there are quite strong. There is a huge influence, and this influence cannot be eliminated in the short perspective. It is not a easy job to do. And of course, by the mass orchestration and the wide use of these political forces and actors, this scenario is quite possible. Meanwhile, the Kremlin will be testing reaction of neighboring NATO member states and the countries from the region of the Eastern Europe. And in this relation, Moscow is going to create as many headaches within the West as possible in order to decrease its efficiency, especially amid the growing tensions between Washington and Brussels.
Grigol Julukhidze, Associate Professor of the Caucasus University, was our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.